Hello, Sylacauga. I'm Randy Clark, and I'm here today with one of my longtime friends, Mr. Cabot Barden. Hey, Cabot.
Hey, good to
Let
see
me
you.
tell you a little bit about Cabot. Cabot is one of our local Sylacaugans. He is born and raised here in Sylacauga. If I'm not mistaken, you make your home up around Talladega now?
Yeah.
But he is a true Sylacaugan. That's why we got him on here. And let me just tell you some of the titles that Cabot has carried over the years and present. He is an author. He's published 17 books, and he's a songwriter. He's a musician. He's a music store owner, and he also has two movies, and wrote music to a third movie to his credit. You ready, Cabot?
I'm ready.
Let's talk about author. What in the world made you start writing books? It just come natural, or?
Well, years ago, I wrote down a bunch of memories of playing in the band with Frank Lister and Charlie Gamble. And,
So Hoya.
well, actually, it was Common Faith, the old band we played in 1971 through 73, and we had several different people here that were in and out of the band with us.
That was our high school days, wasn't it,
Oh
Cabot?
yeah, right after high school. And I wrote all those memories down and I just stuck them back. And in 1989, my buddy Frank Lister and us wrote a song called Heroes of Yesteryear, which went number 20 on the pop charts that year. We wrote it inspired by Clive Cussler, who was a good, he's written over 60 number one bestsellers. And I wrote Clive a fan letter and said, we wrote a song about inspired by you and your books, and could we present it to you? And he said, sure, we'll be in Mobile in September this year. So we went down to Mobile in September and met him, and we presented the song. He loved it. He made us members of NUMA, and we made him an honorary member of our band at that time, Sequoia, like you're talking about. And so then I didn't really think seriously about writing, but I asked Clive at that time, I said, if I ever wrote a book, what would I write about? He said, write what you know. And if you don't, find out. And I said, okay. So I stored that back. 2009, I was sitting around unemployed, had no job, nowhere to live, and no car. And I said, well, I've got all this time on my hands. Why not do something with it? So I started writing that first book.
And what was the first book, Cabot?
It's The Bass Player.
The Bass Player.
Based
Okay.
on playing with Frank Lister and Charlie Gamble. And of course, I changed all the names to protect the author.
Right, right.
But I got the book published through a publisher, what they call a vanity publisher. Wasn't a real good publisher, but he got it out there for me. So it did real good, and Clive endorsed it. He put a little saying on there on the front of the book and all. And it did so well, I decided to write a sequel to it, and I wrote that, and that did well.
What was the sequel, Cabot?
Mixed Blessings.
Okay. That was your second book.
Yep. And that one did real well, so I wrote the third one in that series called Dynamite Runs in the Family.
Okay.
Which it starts out talking about how my mom met my dad in Savannah and how they ended up here in Sylacauga.
Okay.
And then it picks back up the story of the main character, Toby.
Okay. Now, I see you wrote a lot of books, Cabot. 17 books right here.
And that 18th's about to come out.
Number 18's on its way out.
Yep.
Okay. Could you touch on some of the, we won't touch on them all, but could you touch on some of these I know they're all special to you, but some of them that just comes to mind that was real special to you. And I know you got the Cherokee series too.
Yeah. Well, after I finished up the three first books, I wrote a book about my ancestors, my Irish ancestors. I have Cherokee and Irish ancestors, but my Irish ancestors were in South Georgia, and they were what they call indentured servants on a plantation in South Georgia, which is the same as slaves. They were just Irish instead of black,
Right.
so they called them indentured servants.
Yeah.
Treated the same way.
Right.
But anyway, I wrote that one, and it did real well, and so I wrote a sequel to that called Shillelaghs and Scoundrels. That's a mouthful.
Okay.
And that picks up where the other one left off and comes up through where my grandfather served under Teddy Roosevelt in the Spanish-American War. in 1898, and then he became a deputy sheriff in Fitzgerald, Georgia for several years. And so then somebody came to me and said, why don't you write about the Indians in Talladega County? I said, okay, I don't know much about that. And they said,
You started doing some research.
yeah,
today.
I dug and dug and dug and found all kinds of great stories. And finally I decided on writing about Sylacauga Chinabee, the guy that saved Fort Leslie during the Creek Indian Wars. And I told his story that he told to Dr. Camp that lived up there just not 100 yards from where his house was.
Remember Dr. Campwell?
Well, this is a different Dr. Camp. This one lived in 1813.
Oh, I didn't know him.
Yeah. No, we don't know him. But he wrote Sylacauga's story down, and I picked it up and said, well, I'm going to embellish on this and give Sylacauga a personal life, because there was nothing about his personal life in there. And so anyway, I wrote that book, and it became a bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
And the story tells of how Sylacauga saved Fort Leslie, escaping Fort Leslie, which was surrounded by 1,000 Red Sticks, dressed in a hogskin, head and all, and ran up to Ohatchee, where Davy Crockett and Andrew Jackson and 2,000 soldiers were at Fort Strother, and got them to march all the way back down to Talladega from 12 midnight to 7 that morning to do the battle in Talladega against the Red Sticks.
Okay.
And there were about 400 Indians killed and about 15 soldiers killed. And anyway, that one did great, and so I wrote a sequel to it called The Ghost Walker. And it's about the story of Jim Fife, and it was after Sylacauga was killed in 1835. And then I wrote another sequel to that one called Muskogee Red Dawn, which is about Jim Fife's son, Little Jim.
Okay.
Then after that, I think the next series was the U.S. Marshal series, which was the first one was Saddle Up. And I'd already met John T. Wayne, John Wayne's grandson, by that time, and I asked John at that time, I said, I'm about to start a U.S. Marshal series. Would you mind if I use your name in the book? He said, go ahead, Pilgrim. I said, okay. So John T. is in the three books in that series called the U.S. Marshal series, Train from Tombstone series. The first one is Saddle Up. The second one is Fortress of Corruption. If you read Fortress of Corruption, you might recognize the villain in the book, because he's based on a certain sheriff that used to be here in Talladega County.
Okay.
But this is back 1900. But anyway, and the third book is Field of Bones, which that one the villains are Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And I did a lot of research on that, and I found out that Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, everybody thinks they were killed in Bolivia, but they weren't. They paid off the Bolivian government to say they were killed down there, and they came back to the United States and lived under other names.
Several different movies in this, but they wasn't killed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and give us a couple more, Cal.
The Cherokee Kid series was after that, which there's 3 of those. The first one is Treasure of Dead Man's Past, and then the second one is The Trouble Magnet, and the third one is told by John Welch's wife. John Welch was an actual Cherokee Indian who became a U.S. Marshal, and if he had told anybody he was a Cherokee, they wouldn't let him be a marshal back then.
They didn't allow that, did they?
No, because he was Indian. And
Okay.
you couldn't be a United States citizen if you were an Indian, which
Right.
figure that one out.
I know.
But anyway, after he died in 1928, his wife tells the story in the end of the trail. His wife, Kelly Burton Welch, which I found a girl named Kelly Burton, and I used her pictures for Kelly Burton Welch's pictures in the book. Kelly Burton is the daughter of Mickey Burton, who lives in Alexander City.
Okay.
And she helped me co-write that one, because that one had to be told from a woman's point of view, and let's face it, you know, us guys, we ain't in sync with women that close, so I got a woman to help me out.
That's right. Okay. You can see a couple of Cabot's books back here behind us, and before we moved on to your next career, can you tell us about some book signings that you might have coming up?
Well, I've got one here.
I know we got one right here, right?
Yeah, at the museum next Thursday.
Okay, that's
And-
next Thursday.
Yeah. And the next day, well, that following weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I'll be in Waterloo, which is up there next above Tuscumbia.
That's a powwow.
Yeah, it's the Indian powwow. That is called End of the Trail of Tears. Where you have a lot of motorcycle riders come up there, and there's usually about 2,000 to 3,000 people there at least every year.
That's a big powwow.
Yeah, and of course the motorcycle riders and the Indians too. And I think the one after that is Faultville, which is up there near Decatur. I'll be doing that one the following weekend, which is the Ochoto Cherokees. I belong to the Anahuamia tribe in Gunnersville
Okay,
because my family's Cherokee. My grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee,
okay.
so it was.
Then you got one in Childersburg.
Yeah, that's a band that's playing there. Memory Lane's going to be playing for the Childersburg High School reunion.
Okay.
And,
That's October 14th.
yeah, we'll be at Majestic Caverns, used to be the Soda Caverns.
Then you got one at Nakalulu Falls.
Yeah,
That's the Nakalulu powwow. That's the 15th to 6th, if I'm not mistaken. That's in Gaston, right?
yep.
And then you got one at the Aston Library, November the 5th.
Yeah, I'm doing a speaking engagement there.
Okay.
For some ladies. I usually speak to the Daughters of the American Revolution, at events.
Okay. Calvin, before we move on to the next one, could you tell our viewers if they want to get one of your books and they don't make it to one of these book signings, how can they go about, I'd like to have all 17 of them myself. If somebody wants to start buying your books, how can they get them?
Well, we have a lot of them here at the museum.
Okay.
They're for sale. If you just don't want to buy the book, but you still want to read it, they've got them at the library here, and most of the libraries here in the South.
Okay.
And
But what if they want to buy it?
if they want to buy it, you can get it through Amazon, Kindle, Books A Million, and Barnes and Noble. And
Okay.
Second and Charles and Anniston, or Oxford, Alabama has them.
Okay. Now, let's talk about something else I'm really interested in. And you've been doing this, I know, for a long time. Songwriter, Cabot Barden, the songwriter. Tell me, how did you get started writing songs?
Well, I wrote a lot of
This
poems.
was at an early age, right?
Yeah, I was 14, I started writing poems. And then when I was 16, I picked up a guitar and started playing. And when I was 17, Frank Lister and I put a band together and started playing together. And we were playing honky tonk dives and all that. Because after football season, there was nothing else left to play but the honky tonks.
Right,
After game parties was about it.
right.
So we started playing gigs, and Frank and I started writing songs together. And had a little band called Common Faith. We went up to Muscle Shoals in '72 and went in the studio up there at Muscle Shoals Sound. And Barry Beckett was our producer. Now, Barry Beckett's produced everybody in the business from Alabama to Paul McCartney.
Right.
And he sat down with us. He was just an A&R man at that time. And he sat down with us and said, okay, I'm going to record these songs you got, which there's 7 songs. We went in, recorded the 7 songs, and he played them back. He played about less than a minute of each song. And the first 6 songs, each time he'd shut it off after about 10, 20 seconds. That don't hit me. He got the 7th song, he said, that's a hit. He said, we gotta do something with that. And I said, okay. And so he said, I'll contact Atlantic Records and see if we can get a contract for you guys. So we went home just, wow, we're gonna have a contract. We're gonna be up there. And 2 weeks later, our lead guitar player that was playing with us from Alexander City, Mike Thomas, called us up and said, I quit. So we called Barry back and said, look, Mike quit. Can we still get the contract? No.
No.
He says, either all of you or none of you. Okay. So we lost out on that. But then Frank and I in '76, we were working in a studio in Montgomery. We were staff writers for a small recording studio there, owned by a couple of guys who were musicians for Clarence Carter. And fact, one of them wrote "Slip Away" for Clarence Carter, Wilbur Terrell, and we recorded a little record. We made a record down there called "If I Didn't Love You," and we took it around all the radio stations. But before we did that, we had to have a name for the band. And the owner of the studio said, "Well, why don't you call it Alabama?" We said, "Okay." We didn't think nothing of it. Took it around to all the radio stations, all the DJs. They liked the song, but they said the name Alabama, you guys, no, it ain't never gonna fly. Y'all won't get anywhere with that name. And of course, 4 years later, here comes Alabama across the show, Fort Payne.
Right.
And I was proud of them for doing that. Proved all the DJs wrong.
There's how many songs would you say that you have wrote over the years, Cal? A bunch.
A bunch. As far as radio airtime, I've had about 5 songs on the radio at different times that I've covered.
Okay. That brings us to the next one. Musician, Cabot Barden, musician. What all instruments do you play, Cabot?
How much time you got? I play guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, Indian flute, harmonica, banjo, mandolin. I hadn't tackled a fiddle yet. My wife bought me a fiddle not too long ago and it's sitting there collecting dust. I ain't got to that one yet.
But you play just about all of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're also a music store owner.
Well, I'm a manager.
Right.
I used to be a music store owner.
You did at one time. You had a music store in Talladega.
Yeah, Libby and I owned one
Right.
right next to Miller's Barbecue for about 3 years up there, and but the internet killed us, and we
Right.
finally had to shut it down because.
And now somebody else is thinking about bringing a music store into Talladega, and you're gonna be the manager for it, right?
Yeah, Kevin Smith, the guy who's refurbishing the square in Talladega, owns Bottle Works. We're gonna put a music store right next to the Bottle Works.
Okay. Now, can you name all the bands you've been in? And
Again,
especially, I really want to talk about the one that you're in now. Y'all play some great music.
yeah. Well, let's see. In high school, we played in a band called Creed.
Okay.
This is before the other Creed came up.
Right.
And it was me and Tim Stradley and Gary Waldrop and Marty Cannon and Frank Thacker played drums with us at one time. And then Frank Lister and I started playing together in Common Faith, and that lasted about 3 years. And then I went,
Can't forget about old Charlie.
yeah, old Charlie.
Charlie Gamble.
Bless his heart, he was a mess.
I know. You met this guy, you never would have thought he could play drums like he could, but he was real good.
Yeah, we were the first band he played in.
Right.
My younger brother Mike was playing drums with us to start with, and he and Frank mixed like oil and water.
That happens a lot to musicians,
Yeah.
don't it, Cal?
And Frank ended up firing Mike, and we hired Charlie.
Okay.
And so Charlie started playing drums with us, and hung in there with us for about 3 years.
Sequoia?
Sequoia was 90, 89, 90, 91, 92. That was a lot further down the line. We had a whole bunch of bands in between that I played with. I played with a band called Smokey Joe in Pensacola at one time. I lived down in Elba and played with a band called Southern Breed, and that was in the 80s. And then that was early 80s, and then in 82 I played with Roy Strickland and the Travelers, Randy Glenn and the Travelers.
And Roy's in your band now, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And Roy and us opened for Mickey Gilley and Emily Harris over here at Jemison. And the next year, Randy opened for Roy Orbison down there.
Okay.
But yeah, we lost Bob, and we lost Dewey in that band.
Dewey Knox.
Yeah, Dewey died just recently of cancer.
Right.
And played in many other bands since then. And then Sequoia, of course, which is the one that we did the greatest amount that I thought we'd ever done. Larry Stevens was a DJ down in Montgomery at Y102, who's the program director. He called us up one day in '92 during the Persian Gulf War, he said, "You got any patriotic songs?" And Frank said, "Do we got patriotic songs? We got them out the hoo-ha." So he said, well, "Bring them on down here and we'll put you on the radio." So he put us on the radio for an hour playing Sequoia songs.
Really?
Including Heroes of Yesteryear, Line in the Sand, It's More Than Just a Flag, and a bunch of others that we wrote together. Of course, Frank passed away back in 2015. We were doing a Common Faith reunion album when Frank passed away.
Okay.
We finished the album, and a month later he had a heart attack and he was gone.
Well, Cabot, let's talk about that band you got right now. I've heard y'all several times, and y'all are fantastic.
Well, thank you. I can't take credit for that because these musicians are some of the best I've ever played with.
They are.
Roy Strickland, Teresa Yeager, Paul Millard, and Timbo Rogers. Timbo, I've known him since he was knee-high and duck. And of course, me and Roy go way back.
Memory Lane.
Yeah, Memory Lane is the band we're in now. And we do a lot of old 70s and 60s rock and easy listening.
Right. Right.
We do Fleetwood Mac and even go back and do Mustang Sally.
That's right. It's amazing how popular the songs still are today.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but this new wave of music they got coming out now is not any good.
It's not any good.
Nothing memorable.
Right.
When we were coming up, if a song was played 4 times on the radio, you remembered it.
That's right.
You know, if you heard the first bars of it, I know what that is.
Yeah.
Any of this stuff now, it all sounds identical.
That's right.
It all sounds the same.
Do y'all have some engagements coming up with Memory Lane here?
We've
You
got
like
one
talking
in
about?
the Childersburg High School reunion we're doing out here at Majestic Caverns. And-
That's the old DeSoto Caverns.
Yeah,
Just changed names now.
yeah.
What's the date on that, Cabot?
It's October the
October the 14th.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's the only gig we got right now. We've got some more coming up. We just played down here at Bandits.
Y'all did?
Sylacauga.
I came down there to see y'all. And y'all sound real good.
Thank you.
And so that the Childersburg will be at the Majestic Caverns October the 14th. Go check them out. Memory Lane. All right, Cabot. You've also been in a couple of movies and wrote music for a third movie. Would you like to talk about those?
Yeah, you and I were in Stroker Race together.
Stroker Race, that's right.
Back in '82.
We had several folks right here in Sylacauga and Talladega County that was in that movie.
Yeah, me and my little brother were both in there.
Right.
Yeah, they got the backs of our heads real good, didn't
That's
they?
right, that's right. I've looked at it many times and tried to see my face. I never seen nothing but the back of my head. But that's okay.
Yeah,
We had a ball.
we got paid for it.
We got paid for it. Got to meet Big Bubba Smith,
Yeah, Ned Beatty,
Ned Beatty, Burt Reynolds, Lonnie Anderson,
Marker Stevenson.
Parker Stevenson.
Yeah, all those people.
It was great. And what other movie was you in?
Well, John Wayne's grandson, and I filmed a movie down here at Calera.
Y'all done that Calera, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In 2018. Jeff Turner was our camera crew, Shoot First Productions. They went down there and shot the video for us. And of course, Ricky McCain, he was in it too. He was the comedy relief at the first of the movie. But it was called A Great Train Heist. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
It's not about 21 minutes long, but it's a lot of fun.
But that's John Wayne's grandson, John T.
Yeah,
And he looked just like him.
he does. He's 6'4".
No, big old guy.
Yep,
So was his grandfather.
yep. He walks and talks just like
Just
John
like
Wayne.
him, don't
His voice is deeper than John Wayne's, but then he never smoked like John Wayne did.
he? Right.
Yeah, John T is a Marine veteran, and he lives up in near trying to think of his hometown, Paragould, Arkansas.
Okay.
He lives near there. He's been doing a lot of Indian powwows with me. That's how I met him. We were doing an Indian powwow at Nakalula Falls about 2016, and we struck a friendship, and we kept running into each other at all these powwows that we did over the years. And, so we got to be good friends, and I invited him to come down here and do a book signing in Sylacauga here at the museum, and wanted in Talladega, and we just shot the movie on that Saturday while he was in town, and that was a lot of fun.
Right. And one other name I forgot to mention is a Sylacaugan that was in that movie you and I was in. He's all over this wall in there. Who's that?
Jim Neighbors.
Jim Neighbors was in
Shazam.
there too. Shazam, Jim Neighbors. He was on the pit crew.
Yeah.
All right. And tell us about the movie that you wrote music for, the third movie.
Sahara, which starred Matthew McConaughey and Steve Zahn and Penelope Cruz. In 2004, Clive Cussler, who wrote the book Sahara, called me up and he said, they're shooting a movie of one of my books finally. I said, oh, really? I said, about time. I said, I've been waiting on Dirt Pit to hit the screen again.
Yeah.
Because the last movie that I saw Dirt Pit in was Raise the Titanic, which was a big flop at the movies. But the book was great. But anyway, Clive said, yeah, they're shooting a movie. I said, they got any music for it? He said, not yet. I said, well, guess what?
That's right. You got some, don't you, Kel?
I had 7 tunes, and he said, well, let me give you Matthew McConaughey's phone number, and you can call him and get in touch and see if you can get the music in there. So I called the number, and I talked to Matthew McConaughey, and he said, yeah, we don't have any music yet. I said, okay. So I sent him with 7 songs, and one was called Sahara, and there's several others. The Quest was one of them. And so they had set it up to use most of the songs in the movie, including a song called Summer's Theme that they were going to use for the end, where he's having a romantic scene with Penelope Cruz. But then Clive sued the movie people because they breached the contract that he was supposed to have final say-so on the screenplay. And they went against what he wanted. They used a screenplay he didn't like. So he sued them, they countersued him. When they countersued him, they came back and said, well, since Cabot's a friend of Clive's, we're just gonna pull his music because we don't want any trouble from him.
Yeah.
So they pulled my music off the movie. But Matthew, being a nice guy that he is, he called me back and said, look, we're not using your music in the movie, but I'd like to do something with the song The Quest. I said, okay, it's copyrighted, I ain't worried about it. So he said, well, I want to see about putting it on the radio in Italy and United States. I said, okay. So about a year later, I got a couple of royalty checks for the song being played in Italy and the United States.
That worked out good, didn't
So
it?
Matthew McConaughey he sent me a couple of coins from the movie, the gold coins they used,
Right.
and sent me about 3 or 4 posters.
That's good.
So he was just a really nice guy.
Right. There you go, folks. My longtime friend, Cabot Barden. And if you hadn't got one of these books, you need to get one. 17 books Cabot has wrote. And like he says, go to some of these book signings. And he will be here at the Color Museum September the 15th, which is next Thursday. Come on down, buy one of Cabot's books, and get him to autograph it for you. And I'm sure he's got a story or two that you can tell too.
By the way, my newest book is called The Vendetta. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The Chameleon is my newest one, which is right here.
Okay.
Which is a 1930s thriller. It's a spy novel based on some of the things my dad told me. He was in military intelligence in the 1930s and 40s. And my newest book that will be out very soon is called The Vendetta, which is a sequel to The Chameleon. And if you like spy novels, if you like James Bond, if you like Indiana Jones, this will be perfect for you because it's in that era, Indiana Jones, and of course, being a spy novel, it's kind of like reading a James Bond novel.
Right. Cabot, I appreciate this interview. You're a true Sylacaugan, and Sylacauga loves you, man, for all the stuff that you've done, and you're still doing it. Comer Museum, September the 15th. And what if somebody wants to book your band for a private event? You're up for that too, right, Cabot?
Yeah, or you can call Timbo Rogers. He's usually handling the bookings for the band.
Right.
Timbo, I don't remember his number right offhand, but you can probably look him up, Google his phone number.
Okay. Or Teresa Yeager.
Teresa Yeager. Yeah.
I know, here not long ago, she cooked my wife's birthday cake for her.
Oh, okay.
And it was delicious too.
Yeah.
And, so next Thursday, September the 15th, come on down here to the Comer Museum. Cabot will be here. He'll be glad to sign one of his books for you. And did we cover it all, Cabot?
I think you did.
Thank you for coming down, buddy.
Thank you.
See you next time.